Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is going to be a tutorial about basic character animation, specifically frame by frame animation, or sometimes we call it tweening or in-betweening. There's a lot of nomenclature attached to these things. Never mention that, never mind that. So let's get started. This is what I'm going to do today. Basically, as you can see, there's a jump cycle, or let's say this should be the walk cycle, because this is how this blobby character, we call it the Mr. Blob. This is how Mr. Blob walks about. Okay, so jumps every now and then, and each time the cycle completes, the animation that governs its movement moves by a certain amount, as you can see. And I'm going to teach you how to do all of that through this template created by Efe Hoca. So this is going to be basically a walk cycle. All right. So what we have here is a sprite sheet, once again drawn by Efe Hoca. It's the same character going through different expressions. We're not going to use all of them. These were just suggestions, and obviously you can create other animation cycles like this character emoting while he's or it is idle, character, you know, turning left to right, jumping in its place, not just forward, or jumping backwards maybe, or doing some action more quickly, or rolling about. You get the idea. You can do lots of states, lots of emotion states, and then connect them together, or you can do lots of cycles and attach them back to back to create more complex animations. So we carefully named each and every layer so that it is easier to track what's going on. We have grin, this is grin, we have happy, we have angry, we have like annoyed, right? We have jumping up, jumping down, and then we have leap forward, leap backward. We have a break in the animation. We have a second break. This is like moving really fast and at the end grinding to a halt, stopping really quickly. We wanted to do that. Then we have a hop. Maybe this character can hop in place. And we have the neutral state, this one. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're not going to use all of them, but this is a good place to begin. And if your intentions is to do this kind of a character animation, and if your character is as simple as a moving blob, you can get away with using this many expressions, or maybe even less, as you will see in a moment. So I need to set up my scene from before. So this is the main parallax composition, as you remember from the last tutorial, but I removed the camera animation so just we can see what's going on over here. In the end, this is not going to be where this animation will take place. If you have an intention to do camera animation, you have to make it part of the front layer. Obviously, the gameplay layer, the action will supposed to take place on. I'm just putting it here right now to see what it looks like, but I'm going to do it correctly in this tutorial. Okay, so before we begin anything, I'm going to save as this file, or maybe let's start with the original file from before, from pre-comps. Let's get pre-comps number 2. Let's push it over here and call it character animations number 2. Okay, and let's open it up. Let's open project character animations 2. As you can see, we're starting empty. All right, so this is what our animation looked like previously. I'm going to switch to one view only because I'm not going to bother with the camera right now, and I don't have an intention to play around with the parallax layer, so I don't need to see all of that. Okay, so yeah, let me just remove this keyframe, and the camera will be locked to the beginning of everything. Okay, I can recreate the camera animation once I'm done with all of the animation in this playground. Okay, and the animation I intend to do will have to be situated in the foreground element, because obviously regardless of how the camera moves, the character will need to be attached to this foreground element. That's where the action is going to take place. Because if I do that camera animation over here and put the character animation on top of everything, they're not going to be attached to the movement of the layers behind it, but it has to be attached to the movement of the layers behind it, especially the foreground. Okay, so what I'm going to do once again is I'm going to go into my project folder and maybe create a new folder, a brand new folder called the character. Okay, it's a good idea to separate everything as mentioned previously, and under the character I'm going to put Mr. Blob in. So I have a PSD layer here. Once again, just go into your Photoshop file, and if everything is staying together, which is perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but make sure every layer occupies as much space as it really needs to, and not any more than that. So not two of these emotes should be in the same layer. One layer, one emote, one state of the character. And if you check it out, like if I hit Control T to open up the free transform controls, you will see that every character occupies the amount of space as it visually needs to, not any more than that. Okay, and this is true for all characters, and once again they are correctly named, or at least they are named to something you can understand. Okay, let's go to the After Effects and let me bring in Mr. Blob's sprite. Once again, we are retaining layer sizes into editable layer styles. Okay, now it has created a bunch of layers inside its own dedicated folder, and there is a composition attached to these. I'm not going to use this composition. This composition is just a version, an After Effects version of the original Photoshop file, but this is not useful for me for doing any kind of animation. Instead, I'm going to call these layers directly into a dedicated composition to do this kind of an animation. Okay? And that animation will consist of a character jumping forwards. Alright, so how do we do this? First of all, I need to know about the size of my layers. Like, these are all approximately the same size, so let's check them out. Like, this is by 1000 by 934, this is like 990, 930, this is 960, 800, and I can clearly see that some of them are slightly bigger than 1000 pixels. So let's try to make a guess, a basic guess, and try to figure out how much this character is going to jump. Maybe it's going to jump about 2 times its original size, or maybe 1.5 times of its original size. That's the amount of jump distance that we want to cover. So let's open up Paint really quickly. What we intend to do is that there's a character here, it starts around here, and it's going to, let's copy and paste it, or maybe Paint is not good that way. And this character is going to jump this distance from here. Let me character is going to jump from here to here, and this is going to be the 0 point, and this is going to be, I don't know, if this is like 1000 pixels wide in general, and this is going to be like 150, and this is going to be 1000, so you get the idea. This is going to be about the size you're gonna need to create your composition. And these drawings, by the way, they're too high resolution. You don't have to do it like this. So maybe you can scale down everything by 50%. Right in After Effects, you don't have to go back to Photoshop and do that or anything. If you scale everything down by 50%, this is going to be 500, this is going to be 750, this is going to be 500. Okay, and let's leave some room next to the size, so we're not just attaching ourselves to the side of the composition and risking clipping, right? So let's give like 200 pixels from the sides as well. This is the amount of space sorry about that, you're gonna need like around 2000 pixels, right? So I'm going to do the composition around that, 2000 by 1000. And this is going to change depending on your layers, depending on your characters, obviously. Okay, so let me create a new composition. It's going to be 1000 high and 2000 wide. Okay, 24 frame rate. That's good, but we're going to animate it differently, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. And instead of calling it comp or main comp, I'm going to call this anim and Mr. Blob walk cycle. Okay? Everything good? And duration, it doesn't need to be like 20 seconds. I'm just going to keep it 2 seconds because this is a cycle after all, and it's going to repeat. It's not going to be 2 seconds in the end. I just want this walk cycle to take exactly 1 second, maybe even less than that, depending on the situation, but I can adjust it later. I'm going to give myself some space for now, but later it's going to be even shorter than this. Okay, this is what we have. Now, in order to see what's going on here, I'm going to create a new solid, and that solid will be the same size as the composition. I'm going to call it background and give it just white. Okay, hit OK. All right. Now I want to call in each and every single one of these layers that I'm going to use. I'm going to need the neutral one. Okay, and they are really big right now. They are about 1000 pixels wide and high, if you remember. We're going to scale them down eventually, and I need to leap forward. Okay, I need jump up. Okay, I need jump down. Okay, this squishy mode. And do I need anything else? Like, do I need break? No, I don't want an immediate stop, and I don't want leap backward. Maybe? No, I can use leap backward as well. So these are the states that I'm going to use, and I'm going to create additional ones using the already existing layers and just warping them around a bit to give it some more shape to this character. Okay? Now what I want to do is, first of all, select all of these layers, hit S to open up their scale adjustments, and just type in 50 to any one of these values. And since all layers are selected and the width and height or X and Y, let's say, attributes are linked right now, wherever I type 50, everything will go to 50. Like, okay? So the other thing I need to do is that I need to draw myself some guidelines to figure out where these character states are going to go. So first of all, let's draw a guide. First of all, open up your rulers using the Control R. Okay? Then place a guide somewhere, like edit this position. Let's give them some known locations. That's always the good idea. And then I can maybe bring this to 400. Oh good, that's exactly 400. And the other one to 1400 perhaps. Maybe this is going to be the jump distance. Okay, so let's go back to paint. If this occupies here 250 pixels and this occupies here 250 pixels, and the travel between them will be like 750, or the opening between them is going to be 750. This is going to be 1250 pixels, something like that. Okay, maybe let's do that. So yeah, maybe this is 400, this is 1600. Okay, it doesn't have to be super exact. You can always play around with these values. Like this is not written in stone or anything like that. The previous example I've shown you was slightly different. This is going to be slightly different. You decide. And then I will have to manage these layers. So what I intend to do is that I want to begin with a neutral state, okay, and I want to end with a neutral state. So I'm going to create another version of this neutral, Control C or Control V or Control D to duplicate. Let's push it all the way to the top. Okay, so I'm going to begin here and jump over here. Now I need to position every layer in between. And at first, it's going to look really dumb, it's going to look really stupid, but the more you play around with it, the more it's going to make some sense. So let's figure out what leap forward is. So leap forward, maybe it's going to be here, and leap backward, maybe it's going to be over here, okay? And jump up, maybe it's going to be over here. Okay, and jump down, it's going to be like here. It's going to first squish itself, you know, push itself to the ground to grab some momentum, grab some power, and then jump up. Okay, that's the basic idea. Remember that about character animations, especially all animations regarding objects or characters in games, we have to create some anticipation. That anticipation is really important because it's going to draw our attention, draw our eye, it's going to dictate, it's going to initiate that animation and give us some space to understand that an action is about to happen. So this is really important. You don't just jump up. Okay, then you also have to ease in to that animation. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to begin with this and end with that. So yeah, let's push jump down all the way over here, and that's also important, like the position of these let's say layers in the layer order. They're not going to ever occupy the same time. So it's not really that important which one is on top, but I want to do this in a, you know, like a staircase. The next time a layer comes up in the timeline, it's going to be the one above, it's going to be the one above, and it's going to be the one above, so it's going to turn into this staircase, and I want to do that, so that's an easy way to track the progression of this animation. Okay, so this one is here, so neutral here, so this jump up will be in the middle, and then the leap backward, and then there's going to be also another jump down in the end, but I'm going to modify these using warp, so later I can easily, you know, copy and paste it or duplicate this layer to reuse it, or maybe just play around with its effect some more in the end, but I'm going to do that later. So what I'm going to do next is, first of all, set up all of these layers in their correct, let's say, lengths, and visualize what it's going to look like before I start adding additional layers. So this is going to be animated on 2s, meaning that each frame of animation will actually occupy 2 frames in your frame rate, meaning that we're going to see images, we're going to see these images 2 times each second in a 24 frame rate. This is called animating on 2s. So the animation resolution in the end will be 12 frames per second, not 24 frames. But we're not doing a 12 frames per second composition because we're going to use the same frame rate as we do inside our main composition in the end, with parallaxing and everything. Every single one of these effects, everything will be look like it is animated on 1s, except for the characters. The characters will be animated on 2s, for instance. Okay, and you can decide to animate on 1s. Animating on 1s is going to take slightly longer, but it is not impossible, especially for a character of this simplicity. It is perfectly acceptable. Okay, but let's set everything to occupy 2 frames each second. Okay, and you can do this as well, or maybe it's much easier to do this because then I can grab the end of it. Sorry about that. Okay, now obviously when you cut a certain layer, it's going to disappear if it no longer exists right under this time slider, and this is what it's going to look like. Okay, boop, 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 boop. Okay, but this is not ready by any means. We have to make sure that it is ready. So what I'm going to do now is that grab all of these and just drag them over here to see all of them. So later I can easily grab every single one of them and do this later to visualize. This is a much better idea, much better option to work with when you're working with animations. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. I am happy with the position of this neutral. I'm going to lock it. I'm happy with the position of the last neutral. I'm going to lock it. This is the beginning and end states. I don't need to play around with them. Okay? Or maybe you have to, but do that first. Okay? So then this jump down animation, it's good, but I want to give it some more depth. And I want to keep the length of that anticipation slightly longer. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this layer, grab warp from over here, or more specifically grab mesh warp. Okay, push it over here, and I don't need this much detail. This is way too much. I need just one subdivision, just one, nothing else. When you are grabbing the mesh warp, just go over here and start playing around. With the animation, I want to just squish this character just a touch more. I mean, maybe not this much, but certainly by some amount. And it's a bit fiddly, as you can see. You have to really go in and grab this point, and it's really hard. What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay. What are you doing? Oh, come on. This is what I mean by when I say fiddly. It is fiddly. Okay. Not bad. Okay, so I need to push everything slightly forwards now. Like by... not this one, but these. Okay. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. And then this jumping animation, which is right now happening too quickly, too fast, and I'm going to have to add additional layers on top of it to simulate that transition. Okay, so let's do this. Before I go to this state, okay, before I go from this to this, I need to create an additional layer. Okay, so first of all, let's start with this. This is way too big. I'm going to make it slightly smaller. Okay, same as this. This could be a bit smaller, not this big. Okay, same as this. Much better. Okay, then I want to create a duplicate version of this. Okay, and select the one underneath and reposition it. Okay, maybe put a mesh warp on top of it as well. Let's just reduce the resolution once more. Okay, and then play around with it. To give it some directionality. Okay, not bad. All right, then it is going to come to this state, which is perfectly fine. Maybe we can play around with the positions a bit more, right? Then I want to create a duplicate version of this, or I can grab this one and use that instead. After leap backwards, this one. I fortunately selected the wrong one. Okay. Yeah, let's grab this. Just track the length of your layers so you see what's going on. It's a little garbled right now. We're going to fix that later. So I'm going to rotate this. Okay. Some like this. Okay, that's good. Then, once again, let's adjust everything so they occupy the correct amount of space over here. Okay. Let's grab everything. Open the lock here as well. Okay. So we can see the state of the animation right now. And I want to get these jump down animations and duplicate them. So this is going to be the first one with no mesh warp, and this is going to be the second one with a slightly more squished version. So I'm going to duplicate both and bring them over here before the neutral. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is push neutral all the way over here, push it here, push it here, but then change their locations. Hopefully this is going to be correct. But yeah, so let's change the position of that. And let's change the position of that. Okay. So yeah, it's going to return back to normal. All right. So in order to visualize everything, let's, reduce their composition sizes. Let's make sure everything is in order. Let's hit U on our keyboard to turn off all of those drop-down menus, and let's watch. Really nice, isn't it? And it's that simple. It's that simple. Like, it took me 12 minutes. Okay? And granted, the character is really simple. It's just a ball, basically. And we are doing this right now with expressions and, as a character animation, not just a basketball, but a character in the shape of a ball. But the real deal will be no different. Like, if it's a more complex character, obviously warping functions have a slightly lower chance of working. You cannot warp every character, obviously, but you can draw in between animations as you need. And you have to create them in Photoshop as states, and then sometimes you can go in and nudge the characters little by little to make sure that they connect to the next action, connect to the next frame. You can do stuff like that. Now I'm going to set up my composition to be whatever size I need to be in. Okay, and apparently it's just like almost 1 second long, which is good. Maybe I want to, do this. Let me show you. So this middle section, maybe I want to push these slightly forward, like create another version, push it here, okay, and let me just grab these two. Okay, so this one will be slightly here and slightly rotated towards here. and this one will be slightly here, slightly rotated towards there. Okay. Okay. And if you want to figure out the peak position of this jumping animation, you can just put one in the middle as well to exactly 1000 pixels. And as you can see, I'm right in the middle of this animation right now. They are intersecting right at the exact middle of this animation. So let's readjust the composition length correctly. Let's hit U on our keyboard to turn these off to see that ladder formation. And this is what's going on. And I can play for hours on this thing, but there is really no need to for now. This is just for demonstration purposes only. Okay, so let's go back to the project. Let me grab my anim Mr. Blob walk cycle, put it under character, and I can turn off this folder. Okay, Mr. Blob sprite, we don't need it, or you can keep it around just as a reference to see all of these characters in here. I didn't have a background layer on these things, so they're barely visible. Let me grab a solid. Okay, put it under here, so you can see the characters in After Effects, all of the character states, all of the emotion states in After Effects as well, so you don't have to go back to Photoshop or anything. But we really don't need this, so I'm going to put it under Mr. Blob sprite layers to, remove it from my immediate accessibility. Okay, so Mr. Blob walk cycle is complete and I can start using it, but it is just one walk cycle. It has to repeat. Now there are two methods of doing something like that. Let me turn off all of the unnecessary compositions here, including Mr. Blob sprite. Okay, we have the foreground element which the action is going to take place in, and we have the anim Mr. Blob walk cycle, and it has a white background. We're going to remove that background later by just turning it off, obviously, but right now this is good. Now there are two versions of completing this animation as a repeat element, right? We only have one walk cycle, but we want it to repeat over and over again. You can write an expression called loop out, but loop out is really buggy, and in the previous example at the beginning of this tutorial, my example included a loop out expression, but instead of showing you that and having you fiddle around with the minutiae, the intricacies of it in order to get rid of that bug, I'm going to show you the easier way, which is creating a composition and just basically pre-comping this into repeating over and over again. So what I can do here is just push it through composition like this. Okay, just drag it to the composition icon over here. It's going to create its own composition inside another composition. Right now this is 2 seconds long. We didn't cut this, so if you go over here, let's trim the composition to comp length, Control Shift X. Okay, it's just 1 second long now. And if you go to walk cycle 2, let's call this something different, like animation Mr. Blob. Let's call it master. Okay, so any and all animations might be located in this, or just this is going to be the walk cycle by itself. Like, you can say that as well. You could say things like this is a walk cycle, and this could be master anim Mr. Blob walk cycle. Okay, so this is just a single animation, and this is the mastered version of it where multiple walk cycles are attached together. And what I mean by that is, let's increase the length of this from like 2 seconds to 10 seconds. Okay, and as you can see, we have a 1 second animation over here. Let's zoom out in our timeline slider, and I'm going to duplicate this multiple times, and holding shift, I'm going to drag them back to back. And this is the easier option. Okay, because loop out goes out indefinitely, and it is a really good idea to use it, but unfortunately After Effects still didn't figure out some of the issues missing frames or stuttering and things like that, and it is really hard to fix them. It took me a really long time to figure out what was going on, and I still don't understand because, like I said, it's buggy. So instead, this is the much safer option. Now what I have here is the same animation repeating over and over again, and it's repeating exactly in this position. Okay, every second the same animation keeps happening. The character isn't jumping forwards out of the frame, but this is exactly what we needed to do, right? So if I go to parallax foreground and put our character Bob here, Mr. Blob or Bob, whatever you want to call it, it has to move forwards, and this frame of animation has to carry along with it every time the cycle repeats. Okay? Now, when we talk about a walk cycle and not a jumping animation forwards, it is going to be much easier to animate because you can just animate a character walking in its place, and we're going to show you how to do that next time. And then you can linearly animate that character on the screen on another composition. But this time it has to jump. This frame itself, not the character, the frame itself has to jump every time this animation happens. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the fact that this character is just too big right now. So let's scale it down, and let's scale it to a value that we can calculate for. Meaning, like in this case, 24% or 25%, sorry. Okay, and then we can also change its direction by, mirroring it like this. Okay, so the animation is going to happen in this direction now, which is perfectly fine with us. Okay, now what needs to happen here is every second this character jumps, okay, this frame has to move exactly to the position of the last walk cycle, or the end position of the last walk cycle. And that's why we're working with rulers. If you go back to, Mr. Blob walk cycle, if you remember, this is like 400, this is 1600, okay? The distance between them right now is 1200 pixels. So 1200 pixels, okay? 25% of it, 1/4 of it divided by 4 is 300 pixels. Why 25%? Because the scale of this thing is now 25%. If you scale something down, obviously the positional relationship inside of it will change. Previously, the beginning of this animation and the ending of this animation had exactly 1200 pixels between them, from center to center. When you scale it down to 25%, that distance will be exactly 25% of 1200 pixels, and that is 300 pixels. So each time this cycle completes, this layer has to move 300 pixels. Okay, so let me open up its position. Let's give it a known location, like a meaningful location, like 800, I don't know, and this is like 450. I just want to keep the numbers very clean. You do what's necessary in the end. Like if you have to move it by 1 pixel, you move it by 1 pixel. But this time I want to keep the numbers clean. Okay? And it's going to move 300 pixels in this direction every second. Okay? So let's keyframe this position. Let's go to 1 second. Okay? Exactly 1 second. And then type in like plus 300. You can do this, by the way. You can calculate inside this text box. You don't have to calculate it inside your head. Okay? Then let's go to 2 seconds. Okay? And say plus 300. And let's go over here and say plus 300. You get the idea. And there's a good reason why you should be doing this for every second, and I'm going to show you why. I mean, originally you just calculate where it goes at the end of this 10 seconds. So it's going to cycle 10 times, 10 times 300, that's 3000 pixels. You go to the end of it and say, okay, 3000 pixels, and it is going to be linearly interpolated. But who said we're going to linearly interpolate it? We're not going to linearly interpolate it. We cannot linearly interpolate it because the character is already in movement forwards. It is already in its own animation moving 300 pixels. So it has to jump from 0 to 300 to 600 to 900 every second. Not linearly interpolate, but jump. Directly go to that location exactly at that second. That's called toggle hold keyframe, or hold keyframe, basically. And I'm going to show you what it means just in a second. Okay, plus 300, plus 300, plus 300. You get the idea. I'm going to do all of them, okay, while I'm at it. And I don't have to do this because the animation ends over here. There are no more animations, so it doesn't matter if it jumps or not. As you can see, the character has disappeared because my composition has ended. Now, when you leave those keyframes like this is what's going to happen. And it's going to look really stupid for obvious reasons. That's what I'm talking about. The character is already moving inside its own frame of reference, inside its own composition. But we are also moving that frame of reference throughout time. So if you look at the position animation and turn on the graph editor, this is what it looks like. It is being linearly interpolated. Every frame in between is being linearly interpolated. After Effects is carrying this value to this value through a linear fashion over time. We don't want to do that. We want steps over here. Okay? Every time the animation cycle is complete and a new cycle begins, we wanted to start in a brand new location, exactly 300 pixels in forwards, in front of the previous cycle. Okay, so the way to do that is you grab these keyframes. You can just click on the position, and all of these keyframes will be automatically selected. Just right-click and hold and say toggle hold keyframe. Alternatively, you can hit Control Alt and left-click. Okay. So this is called toggle hold keyframe, okay? And now when you check out the graph editor, it is not linear. Exactly at the moment of this transition is supposed to happen, exactly at the keyframe, the value suddenly jumps from the previous value to the new value without any transition space between them. One frame it is here, one frame it's all the way over there, and there is no transition in between them. It teleports, right? This is just teleportation, okay? So when you watch it now, this is what it looks like, okay? And if we turn off the white's color, okay, so this is walk cycle. If you turn off the background, okay, and everything will obviously update in between because that information is inherited. As you can see, the background is missing here. Obviously it's going to be missing in the master anim where we attached all of this walk cycle duplicates back to back, and it's going to be missing in parallax foreground as well. It's a bit hard to see, obviously, because this character is just a drawing. It's not painted or anything. Okay, now it's jumping. Okay, now one last thing to do. Let's Control S to save, obviously. Let's go in to Photoshop, and inside Photoshop maybe paint on these characters and update them. First of all, what I intend to do is I want to increase the opacity of these drawings. Efe Hoca was using an airbrush, so there's a little bit of, let's say, softness to his line art. But I don't even have to do that in Photoshop. I just want to introduce some paint in Photoshop. But what I can do in After Effects before that is, for example, go into Mr. Blob walk cycle, and I can do it here, or I can even do it way over here, or I can even do it in the final work. Maybe let's show you a new trick. Let's grab an adjustment layer. So this adjustment layer is a layer that will affect literally everything underneath it. Okay, so instead we can use just Minimax. Okay, we can use Minimax, or maybe let's turn on this. Okay, and Minimax basically grows the edges and stuff like that, sort of like this. Don't shrink the edges. I can give it some depth, or maybe I can adjust the matte a bit. So let's say refine soft matte, not use Minimax, but I can increase the contrast. I can go in and create a solid in a weird color. Okay. Okay, so what I intend to do is, get rid of this opacity issue. Okay, let me just grab this, put it under here. Yeah, refine soft matte. Let's delete this. Okay. Let me try to figure out what's going on. I want to calculate the edge details. I don't want to feather it. Yes, this is what I want to do. Okay. So what I'm doing here is, there is a matte to this. Matte as in an opacity mask, right? This is an airbrush, and not all color values here are exactly 100% opaque. There is some transparency to literally every pixel, and that transparency can be considered as a matte. Like, how much of data are you allowing from underneath this layer to show through? That is called a matte. It is similar to what a mask is, but the terminology here is called a matte. So you can modify that matte, and by shifting the edge details, shifting the edge of this matte inwards, I am basically creating a huge amount of contrast and regaining that opacity back. So if I do this for every layer beneath by using an adjustment layer, and let's say this refined soft matte will have to go over there. Let's Control X and Control V and turn these off so that they are not a part of that system. Because if I'm using this, okay, if I'm using these solids, since adjustment layer is considering the combination of all the layers underneath it, a background will basically remove that matte altogether, because the background plus this drawing will be considered as a single image. Okay, but if I remove the cyan solid and background, which I won't need in the final product, as they are being updated, as you can see, they are being updated with the transparency intact. That's the principal idea behind this. Now, this is one way you can modify objects or modify layers in After Effects, and I know it is hard to know about refined soft matte. You have to know about it, right? And maybe this will help you out, but there are so many other effects and modifiers in After Effects that will you know, get rid of the necessity of going back to Photoshop and making some changes. If I were to do this in Photoshop, for example, I would have gone in and duplicated a neutral bunch of times and then merge them down using Control E. That's another way to do it. And you can do that for every single one of these layers. So let's also show you how to do that. So let me go back to this adjustment layer and remove it all together. As you can see, it has updated. The matte was reverted back to its original. Okay, nothing has changed. So if I go to Photoshop and I'm going to like duplicate each and every single one of these layers exactly 4 times. And it's going to take some time, but it's important as you're doing this to keep consistency first of all. And I don't have an intention to merging all of these layers. I only want to merge the duplicated versions of these. So if I hit Control E, it is a shortcut for merge down, as you can see. And they have to merge down to this layer. So green copy, copy 2, copy 3, and copy 4 have to merge down to this layer. And when naming is concerned in Photoshop, the layer that you are merging down to will be the original name. This is important because if I change the name of this layer green, and maybe it's a green copy, maybe it's something else, when I go back to After Effects is going to tell me, hold on a second, I was looking for that layer inside that Photoshop file and that layer no longer exists, right? That is important. So as you're merging down, the name should be the original name of the layer to begin with, okay? Alright, now if I go to After Effects, oh, sorry, I need to save it first, obviously. As you can see, it works. Okay, apparently the power went out and my power supply UPS started working, so I only have like 5 minutes. So I'm going to pause this video right here, save everything, and come back. Power came back. 4 hours later, my t-shirt has changed, but I can go on. Okay, back to it. So as you can see, it is updated. And what else I can do here is that I want to paint these in. And for each and every single one of them, obviously there has to be a painting which is separate than all of the other emotions, all of the other states of this character. So a couple of ways I can do that is, first of all, I can generate a layer that will hold the paint in. Okay, just a layer that will apply to everything for now. And I can grab a bunch of different colors. Like, let's select black and white, let's go to filters. And from here I can select render clouds, and it's going to generate something like this. And then I can go to other filters from filter gallery, and let's go to brush strokes and maybe select this. This is too much. Maybe let's say dry brushing. Okay, yeah, why not? Maybe fresco. Fresco we already tried. Sponge is a bit weird. Watercolor always gives good results, but not in this case. Pastel, palette knife. Let's go with the dry brush. Dry brush looks the best. Let's increase the texture a bit, and brush details, let's try them. Okay. Hit OK. I mean, it's not super good or anything. Let me give it some Gaussian blur, like 10. 10 is a bit too much. Let's go with 5. Okay. Let's go to filter gallery again, and this time canvas, stroke length, stroke detail. Yeah, why not? Okay, and let's blur it again, this time lower, and then I can go in to hue saturation, colorize this. Let's maybe remove some of the contrast first from levels. Maybe do this to remove some contrast. Let's go to hue saturation, colorize it. Let's give it a beige color. Okay, all right. So it's not super good or anything. I'm just trying to create some randomness in the brush strokes. Okay, that's the idea at least. And I'm going to use this layer and apply it to every single one of them while cutting the rest. So if I go to, for example, Magic Wand tool, and instead of like sampling only the selected layer, if I hit sample all layers over here, everything will be sampled to create a cutout. Okay, and now it is selecting a bunch of colors, obviously in this splotchy color palette. But if I increase the tolerance to something really big, like 128, it's going to only select the dark outlines. Now this selected area I can delete, not from happy, but from this layer itself. Okay, and quite possibly do the selection again, because the neutral have to be included as well. So let's select it again, remove everything, Control D to deselect. Okay, now what I can do here is select each and every single one of these areas, Control X to remove it, cut it, and Control Shift V to paste in place. That is important. What I mean by that is, if you go in, let's cut another one from layer 1. If I cut it, Control X and Control V, it's going to come in the middle of my canvas. But if I hit Control Shift V, it is going to go to its original place, only as a different layer. Okay? Now, obviously, I will have to find each and every single one of these, okay, and remove them first, paste them in place again, and then merge it down with the outline that it should belong to. That's going to take some time, but it's a quick and dirty way of painting in your objects. Obviously, you can go in the dedicated layer and try to paint it in, but I don't want to, do that. It's going to take more time. And yeah. Now, unfortunately, I have many layers to take care of, and we're not finished yet. We still have to go in and merge it with the appropriate layer, obviously. And I'm going to, make a copy of these, group them first, create a copy, and put it in here, disable it, save as this file. Let's go to group, and now that I have, for example, grouped up these layers, they're no longer out in the open, and I've saved this file. If I go to After Effects, it should start freaking out. It hasn't yet. Good. But it might. it might freak out once the names change. Okay, so that's the important bit. Now, for example, let's turn off everything and let's figure out which one of these layers belongs to this one, which is layer 2. Okay, so layer 2 is underneath here. I can put it on top of it as well, but then it will block out the outline, so the order should be like this. But once I click on the neutral and merge down, the name of this newly merged layer will revert back to the bottom one, which means it is going to say layer 2. Okay, and if I save this and go back to here, this should no longer work. It is still working. Maybe this is a separate layer. Let's see. Or a separate file, my bad. No, Mr. Blob Sprite, it's still here. It is saved. But it's not getting this. Not yet. Okay, why is it? Maybe it's because of this. Like if I remove this and Control S to save. Oh, there you go. Because we had a copy of those layers originally, so it could still find the appropriate layer. Because if you look at here, under the group, you see we still have the neutral here. So it could still find the appropriate layer. But once that group was removed and the layer neutral no longer existed, or it exists but as a different layer now, layer 2, After Effects cannot address that layer anymore. It cannot find it. So you should be careful about naming your layers. If the name changes, you might have to re-import your file altogether. Okay, that's the idea. So what I should do here is, first of all, I want to save the group, obviously. So I'm going to save as Mr. Blob Sprite, and I'm going to create a second version, okay, just to hold everything in. And this is the number 2 is here now, so I can keep working on this one. This is not number 2, this is the original one. Okay, so I can remove this. So this layer 2 now, as you can see, is not being addressed. Okay, check what happens when I rename this layer. Neutral one, back to its original. Save, and it should come back. Hopefully, it is saved. Yeah, or no? No. Yeah, it still cannot find this layer. So yeah, that's a bit problematic, isn't it? So once you start changing stuff, and you know, rename your layers or lose them entirely, this issue could happen to you as well. So you should be careful about naming your layers. Hold on a second, I want to fix this, obviously. So first of all, I'm going to you know, go back to merge down and make sure this naming standard is the one that I have been using. So I want to merge these layers. And yeah, if I do this, instead of using merge down and then save, oh no, it still isn't working. Neutral. Yeah, that's problematic, as you can see. It is still considering this layer 2 as the newly made layer and not the original neutral, which is a problem. Okay, so that was a good demonstration of what could happen . Okay. So if I try to reconnect this, reload footage, it reloads it, and I don't know where it reloads it from, because it is now updated, and yeah, unfortunately it is updating it from someplace else. Oh no, here it is. Okay, when I reloaded it, it worked. Okay, that was good. But as you can see, this is quite the issue, right? So I had to do it for literally every single one of them. So for example, this is layer 12 apparently, and it is supposed to be under hop. Okay, so let's select both, merge the layers. Let's open up break. This is layer 11. Let's go to break 2, merge these layers. Make sure that the one on the top is the correctly named one, and then break 1. This is layer 10. Let's go here, break 1, select both, merge the layers. The naming is still correct. Leap backward. This one is important because we're using this one already. Leap backward, grab this one, merge the layers, leap forward, layer 8 apparently. Let's go grab this one, merge the layers, jump. This should be layer 2 or 1, or I don't know. Let's select 3 apparently. Merge the layers, jump up, layer 4, merge the layers, annoy, this is layer 1, merge the layers, what else, angry, layer 7, merge the layers. I'm not merging down, I'm merging these layers one by one. So that's one of the ways it works. Oh. Okay, good. Merge the layers, and finally merge this one and this one. Merge the layers. Save the file. Now when we go back, all of them are updated. They are painted in. So the more finished and finalized your Photoshop file is when you're using these layers as assets inside of After Effects, the better, because then you will have to spend less time changing each and every single one of these layers to whatever you want. And you won't have issues updating those layers ever again. And sometimes you will have to add additional layers, and unfortunately an already imported Photoshop file cannot be updated with layers that previously didn't exist. That is not a functionality that is available yet. That is a problem that they didn't solve yet in terms of the connectivity between After Effects and Photoshop. So if you create an additional emotional state, additional animation state, let's say, you will have to import the file again, or at least parts of it, in order to utilize it appropriately. So basically that's it. The one last thing we can do is obviously remove the background again and just check what's going on. And if I go to parallax foreground, there we go. This gray blob is jumping around 12 frames per second. So now if I go to main comp parallax, say this is jumping around like so till here. So let's grab the camera position. Oh, not this one. Okay. Maybe here. so we want to follow this character, okay, and yeah, it's starting over here, but I cannot go any further than this to centralize the character. So what I'm going to do instead is just grab everything and move them forward around here. So yeah, it will all automatically update everything. Okay, so let's go over here. But it didn't for some reason. Okay, now it works. Okay, bit backwards, not this much. Okay. Okay, now I'm here, and over here I should be over there somewhere. So let's watch. It is rendering, that's why it's choppy. Okay, so the camera animation is a bit too clean. It has a lead in and lead out. So what I can do here is go grab this and make sure this is not as smooth. Let me go to position again and remove these last keyframes. Okay, and make sure that position is separated to X and Y values. Okay, so I want this X value, smooth it out, but not this much. So what I'm going to do is just do this, do this. It is going to start from 0 once again and smoothly interpolate, but not as smoothly as previously. Okay, so it's going to be more linear towards the middle. There you go. It's a bit lagging behind, but you get the idea. Okay, so that's how you do a character animation if you're using in-betweening. By drawing every single frame and then modifying those frames if necessary to create additional frames or additional transitions between the frames. That's how you do it. In the next tutorials, we're going to show you other techniques for character animation as well. Hopefully this helps, so see you next time.